She threw his ring in the dust and screamed, "Leave." Months later, she crossed Texas begging him to stay.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The words had left her mouth like bullets from a chamber, each one finding its mark with devastating precision. Clara Matthews stood on the porch of her family's homestead, watching the dust cloud that followed Samuel Hartley's horse as he rode away from everything they had built together. Her hands trembled against the wooden railing, and the engagement ring he had given her only 3 months prior felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds on her finger. She had told him to leave. She had screamed it, actually, with tears streaming down her face and her heart breaking into pieces so small, she wondered if they could ever be put back together. The letter from his former sweetheart in Kansas City had been crumpled in her fist, those beautiful words from another woman burning through her palm like a brand. She hadn't let him explain. She hadn't wanted to hear the lies she was certain would follow. Clara watched until Samuel became nothing more than a speck on the horizon, until the setting sun swallowed him whole. And then she collapsed onto the weathered boards of the porch and wept until her body had nothing left to give. The seasons changed around the Matthews homestead, with cruel indifference to Clara's suffering. Autumn stripped the trees bare, winter blanketed the Texas plains in rare sheets of white, and spring brought wildflowers that Clara couldn't bear to look at because Samuel had once woven them into her hair and called her the most beautiful thing God had ever created. She went through the motions of living. She helped her aging father with the cattle. She mended fences and hauled water, and pretended that each sunrise didn't remind her of the mornings she had spent, wrapped in Samuel's arms, planning a future that now lay shattered at her feet. It was her mother who finally confronted her one evening in late May when the heat was beginning to settle over the land like a heavy blanket. Margaret Matthews had always been a woman of few words, but the one she chose carried the weight of mountains. "Clara Marie, you're dying from the inside out, and I won't watch it happen any longer." Clara looked up from the beans she was snapping, her fingers stilling over the bowl. "Mama, I don't know what you mean." "Don't you lie to me, child. I've held my tongue for 5 months because I thought you needed time to grieve, but grief is meant to pass. What you're carrying isn't grief anymore. It's regret, and it's eating you alive." The words struck Clara harder than any physical blow could have. She opened her mouth to protest, to defend herself, but nothing came out except a small, broken sound that might have been the beginning of a sob. Her mother sat down across from her and took her hands, the beans forgotten between them. "Did you ever read that letter properly? Did you ever give that boy a chance to explain himself?" Clara shook her head, shame flooding through her like a river breaking through a dam. "I was so angry, Mama, so hurt. I just wanted him gone before he could hurt me any worse. And has his absence healed you? Has pushing him away given you peace?" The answer was written in every sleepless night, every tear-stained pillow. Every morning Clara woke reaching for a warmth that was no longer there. She hadn't found peace. She had found a hollow emptiness that threatened to consume her entirely. That night, Clara retrieved the letter from the bottom of her hope chest, where she had buried it beneath linens meant for a marriage that would never happen. She smoothed out the crumpled pages with trembling fingers and read them properly for the first time. The letter was from a woman named Elizabeth Monroe, and it did speak of love, but not the kind Clara had imagined. Elizabeth wrote of her gratitude to Samuel for saving her brother's life during the cattle drive of '68, how Samuel had pulled young Thomas from a flooded river at the risk of his own safety. She wrote of her family's eternal debt to him and her hope that he had found happiness in Texas. She mentioned that she would be forever grateful to have once called him a friend, not a sweetheart, not a lover, a friend whose brother owed Samuel his very existence. Clara read the letter 3 more times, and with each reading the magnitude of her mistake became clearer. She had destroyed the most precious thing in her life over a misunderstanding, over her own fears and insecurities that had twisted innocent words into something sinister. By morning, her decision was made. Her father tried to stop her, of course. William Matthews stood in the barn door as Clara saddled her mare, his weathered face a mask of concern and frustration. You can't just ride off across Texas looking for a man who could be anywhere by now. It's dangerous, Clara. It's foolish. It may be both those things, Papa, but I have to try. I wronged him something terrible, and if there's even the smallest chance he might forgive me, I have to find him and beg for it. William studied his daughter's face for a long moment, seeing something in her eyes that hadn't been there for months. Life, determination, hope. Finally, he stepped aside. The last anyone heard, he was headed toward El Paso. That's a hard ride for a woman alone. I'm not afraid of hard, Papa. I'm afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. The journey was everything her father had warned and more. Clara rode through blistering days and cold nights, through towns that seemed to sprout from the desert, like stubborn weeds. She asked about Samuel at every stop, described his tall frame and dark hair, the scar above his left eyebrow from a horse that had thrown him when he was 12. The way he smiled like the sunrise itself lived in his face. Some people remembered him. A bartender in Midland said he had passed through heading west. A shopkeeper in Pecos recalled selling him supplies about 3 months back. A rancher outside Van Horn had hired him for a few weeks of work before he moved on again. Each piece of information was a breadcrumb, leading Clara closer to the man she had pushed away, and with each step of her horse's hooves, she rehearsed the words she would say when she found him. I'm sorry, I was wrong, I never stopped loving you. Please come home. She found him in a small settlement 2 days outside of El Paso, in a dusty excuse for a town that barely deserved the name. He was working at a livery stable, his broad shoulders visible even from a distance as he hefted bales of hay like they weighed nothing at all. Clara's heart stopped beating. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the man she had been searching for across hundreds of miles of unforgiving terrain. He looked thinner than she remembered, harder somehow, like the months apart had carved away everything soft and left only the essential parts behind. She climbed down from her horse, on legs that threatened to give way beneath her, and walked toward him on pure determination alone. Samuel must have sensed her approach because he turned before she reached him, and the expression that crossed his face was like watching a man see a ghost. He dropped the hay he was carrying, his hands falling limply to his sides, his dark eyes wide with shock. Clara. Her name and his voice broke something open inside her, and suddenly all the words she had rehearsed scattered like leaves in a windstorm. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the new lines around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened as he struggled to control his emotions. I read the letter, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The whole letter. I know about Elizabeth's brother. I know you saved his life. I know she was never anything more than a grateful friend, and I know I destroyed us over my own stupid fears. Samuel said nothing. He just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read, and Clara felt panic rising in her chest. She had come all this way, risked everything, and now he was looking at her like she was a stranger. I was wrong, Samuel. I was so terribly, unforgivably wrong, and I understand if you can't forgive me. I understand if you want me to ride back the way I came and never bother you again. But I couldn't live another day without telling you that pushing you away was the biggest mistake of my life, and there hasn't been a single moment since you left that I haven't regretted it. Tears streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother to wipe them away. Let him see what these months had done to her, how losing him had hollowed her out and left nothing but the shell of the woman she used to be. You told me to leave. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. You stood on that porch and told me you never wanted to see my face again. You threw your ring at my feet and called me a liar and a cheat. Clara flinched at each accusation because every word was true. She had done all those things and worse. She had wounded him with words meant to cut deep, and she could see now that they had found their mark. I know what I said. I know what I did. And I know that nothing I say now can undo that hurt. But Samuel, I love you. I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you until they put me in the ground. I was scared and stupid, and I let my fear destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. Samuel took a step toward her, then stopped, his hands clenching at his sides. Do you have any idea what it felt like to ride away that day? To leave everything I'd built, everything I dreamed about, because the woman I loved thought so little of me? I didn't think little of you. I was terrified of losing you, so I pushed you away first. I told myself it would hurt less if I was the one who ended things, if I didn't give you the chance to leave me for someone else. There was never anyone else, Clara. There was never owing to be anyone else. You were it for me. You were everything. The past tense in his words hit her like a physical blow. Were, was, had been, and now? She asked, her voice breaking on the question. Is there any part of you that still feels that way? Any part of you that might be willing to give me another chance? Samuel was silent for so long that Clara began to accept defeat. She had gambled everything on this journey and she had lost. She was preparing to turn away, to somehow find the strength to walk back to her horse and begin the long ride home alone, when his hand caught her wrist. I've been angry at you every single day since I left, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I've cursed your name and sworn to forget you and tried to convince myself that I was better off without you. But you know what I've never been able to do? Clara shook her head, afraid to speak, afraid to hope. I've never been able to stop loving you. Lord knows I've tried, Clara. I've tried so hard. But you're in my blood. You're in my bones. You're in every breath I take and every dream I dream. And riding away from you was like tearing out my own heart and leaving it behind in the dust. A sob escaped her then, raw and desperate, and full of relief so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. Samuel's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and Clara buried her face in the familiar warmth of him and wept. They stood there in the dusty stable yard, rapé around each other, like survivors of a shipwreck clinging to the same piece of driftwood, and the world continued to turn around them without notice or care. I'm sorry, Clara whispered against his shirt. I'm so sorry, Samuel. I should have trusted you. I should have given you the chance to explain. I should have believed in us. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. And I should have fought harder. I should have refused to leave until you listened to me. I should have made you understand. We both made mistakes. We did. The question is whether we're brave enough to try again. Clara pulled back to look at him, really look at him, at this man who had haunted her days and filled her nights with longing. His eyes were searching her face, looking for something, and she hoped he found it. I rode hundreds of miles to find you, Samuel Hartley. I left everything behind and crossed this unforgiving land alone, because I couldn't bear another day without you. I am willing to spend the rest of my life making up for what I did, if you'll let me. A smile began to break across his face, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it was like watching the sun emerge from behind storm clouds. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that glinted in the afternoon light. Her ring. Her engagement ring. The one she had thrown at his feet in anger. I've been carrying this with me every day, he said quietly. Couldn't bring myself to leave it behind. Couldn't bring myself to let go of the hope that maybe somehow you'd come back to me. Fresh tears spilled down Clara's cheeks as he took her hand and slid the ring back onto her finger, where it had always belonged. Come home with me, she said. Come back to Texas, to the homestead, to the life we were building together. My parents will be overjoyed to see you, and the cattle miss you something terrible. More importantly, I miss you. Every day, every hour, every minute. Samuel leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers, breathing her in like she was oxygen and he had been drowning without her. "There's nothing left for me here, Clara. There hasn't been anything for me anywhere since I rode away from you. You're my home. You've always been my home." When he kissed her, it was like coming back to life after months of simply existing. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck and poured everything she had into that kiss. All her regret, and her love, and her desperate hope for their future. They rode out of that dusty settlement together. Two figures on horseback heading east toward the rising sun, toward home and forgiveness and the promise of a second chance. The road ahead was long, but neither of them minded. They had found each other again, and that was all that mattered. In the years that followed, Clara would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, reaching for Samuel in that old panicked way, convinced he was gone. But he was always there, warm and solid beside her in their bed, and he would pull her close and whisper reassurances until her racing heart calmed. They built their life together, on a foundation of hard-won trust and stubborn love, weathering storms both literal and figurative, with the knowledge that they had survived the worst thing imaginable and come out stronger on the other side. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Clara found him in that livery stable, Samuel would take her hand and tell her the same thing he had told her when he finally agreed to come home. "You came looking for me when you had every reason not to. You were brave enough to admit you were wrong. That's not something I'm ever going to forget, Clara. That's not something I'm ever going to take for granted." They had almost lost each other, but almost was not forever, and forever was exactly what they had.